The service entrance is around back. Natalie Prescott said it without raising her voice, which somehow made the insult sharper. Rain whispered across the stone driveway of the Prescott estate, turning the evening lights into trembling gold. Ryan Whittaker stood beneath the wide front awning with one hand holding his 8-year-old daughter Emily's and the other carrying a weathered leather tool case that had belonged to him longer than most people inside that house had known his name. Beyond the circular drive, polished luxury cars waited beneath white event tents. Through the tall windows, board members, investors, and political guests moved beneath chandeliers while servers crossed the dining room with silver trays. Ryan's old Ford pickup sat near the outer gate, rainwater running down one dented fender. Natalie looked at his faded jacket, his work boots, then at Emily's simple blue raincoat. "If you're here looking for work," she added, "someone at the kitchen entrance can help you." Ryan met her eyes. Calm. Steady. Unoffended. "I'm not looking for work." "Then you're at the wrong door." Emily tightened her fingers around his hand. Ryan felt it. He had learned years ago that children remembered more than adults realized, especially the moments when dignity became a choice. "Arthur asked me to come through this door," he said. For half a second, Natalie only stared. Then a quiet laugh escaped her. "Arthur Prescott?" "Yes." "My father?" Ryan nodded once. Her smile changed from amusement to something almost pitying. "People like my father don't invite strangers through the front door, Mr. Whittaker." "Mr. Whittaker." She glanced at the tool case. "Whatever someone told you, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Ryan could have reached into his coat and shown her the handwritten note in Arthur Prescott's unmistakable script. He could have told her why the chairman of Prescott Dynamics had called him 3 times that week. He could have explained what had happened 12 years earlier, why his name had once been written across engineering reports inside that company, and why almost nobody there remembered it now. He did none of those things. "Maybe there has," Ryan said quietly. Emily looked up at him. "Daddy, should we go home?" He crouched slightly so they were eye level. "Not yet, Em." "Why?" "Because when you give someone your word, you stay until they tell you the word no longer matters." Natalie heard him. So did the doorman. No one answered. Rain tapped against the copper gutters. Somewhere inside, a piano played beneath the murmur of expensive conversation. Natalie checked her watch. "I have a board dinner beginning in 2 minutes. Security can take you around back." Ryan straightened. Before he could answer, the front doors opened. An elderly man stepped outside, silver-haired, straight-backed, moving with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 50 years entering rooms where everyone already knew his name. Natalie turned. "Dad, I was just..." Arthur Prescott walked past her. He passed 2 directors waiting to greet him. Past his chief operating officer. Past every hand already extended in his direction. Then he stopped directly in front of Ryan Whittaker. For the first time that evening, Arthur smiled. He extended his hand first. "Ryan," he said, relief filling his voice. "Thank God you came." Natalie said nothing. And suddenly, neither did anyone else. Arthur kept Ryan's hand for 1 extra second, not as a display of power, but as if confirming that someone important had actually arrived. "Come inside," he said. "Both of you." Natalie stepped aside. Inside, conversation softened as Arthur led Ryan and Emily toward the long walnut table. At Arthur's right was an empty chair. Natalie stopped when her father pulled it back for Ryan. "Dad, that seat is for Senator Caldwell." "Not tonight." "You moved a senator." Arthur glanced at the chair. "I moved a chair." A few people looked down to hide their reactions. Ryan hesitated. "Arthur, Emily, and I can sit at the end. You have spent enough years at the end of other people's tables." The room grew quieter. Ryan seated Emily first, then sat beside her. He did not look toward Natalie. He did not smile at the attention. He unfolded Emily's napkin, placed it across her lap, and helped her cut a piece of bread that was too large for her small hands. Natalie watched him. This was not how her father treated contractors, applicants, or casual guests. Arthur Prescott measured people carefully. He did not rearrange formal dinners without a reason. When the first course arrived, Natalie leaned toward him. "Who is Ryan Whitaker?" Arthur lifted his water glass. "You already met him." "That is not what I asked." "No." Arthur's eyes moved briefly toward Ryan. "It is not." Natalie waited. Finally Arthur said, "Ryan is one of the reasons you are sitting in this house tonight." She stared at him. Before she could ask what that meant, footsteps approached from the hallway. Blake Thornton, Prescott Dynamics Chief Operating Officer, entered while apologizing for being late. His expression was polished until he saw Ryan. Then the color drained from his face. His smile vanished. The leather folder in his hand tightened beneath his fingers. Ryan looked up slowly. Their eyes met across the table. Neither man spoke. Arthur noticed. Natalie noticed. Even Emily noticed. Blake recovered quickly. "Mr. Whitaker." Ryan's voice remained quiet. "Blake." Natalie turned toward her COO. "You know him?" Blake answered too fast. "Not really." Ryan said nothing. Arthur leaned back in his chair. "That," he said softly, "is not true." The forced smile disappeared from Blake's face. "We crossed paths years ago," he said. "That is all." Arthur looked at him. "You worked on the same program." "For a short time." Ryan took a sip of water. Natalie watched him. The calmer he became, the more uncomfortable Blake looked. Dinner continued, but the warmth was gone. Conversation became careful. Silverware touched porcelain. People avoided questions they clearly wanted to ask. Halfway through the meal, Blake received a text. He looked at the screen, then at Ryan, then turned the phone face down. Ryan noticed. He said nothing. Arthur finally rose. "Ryan. Walk with me." Ryan glanced at Emily. Natalie surprised herself. "She can stay with me." Ryan studied her for a moment. Emily nodded. "I'm okay, Dad. I'll be right back." Arthur led Ryan through a paneled hallway into a private study lined with engineering books, framed patents, and photographs from the earliest years of Prescott Dynamics. The door closed. Arthur did not sit. He stood beside the fireplace staring at an old photograph of a manufacturing plant. 12 years, he said. Ryan placed both hands in his coat pockets. Long enough for people to forget. "I didn't forget." Ryan looked at him. "No. You just let everyone else." Arthur absorbed that without defense. A clock above the shelves measured the silence. Then Arthur crossed to his desk and opened a black folder. Westbridge Energy. Ryan's expression changed slightly. "What about it?" "We're buying it." "I heard. $680 million. Final approval tomorrow morning." Arthur pushed several inspection reports across the desk. 3 weeks ago, one of their battery storage facilities failed an internal thermal audit. 48 hours later, the issue was marked corrected. Ryan did not touch the pages. 48 hours. That's why I called you. Ryan finally leaned forward. The temperature data appeared normal at first glance. Then his eyes moved backward through the table. "Where are the raw sensor intervals?" "Not in the board package." "Why?" "Blake's team says they were summarized." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Who approved the correction?" Arthur hesitated. "Blake." Ryan stepped away from the desk. "You brought me here because this feels familiar." Arthur nodded. It is the same kind of pattern. Ryan looked again at the report. Last time I helped this company, my name disappeared. Arthur's voice softened. And I have regretted allowing that every day. Ryan closed the folder. Then tell me why Blake is still here. Arthur hesitated. 12 years ago, I authorized removing your name from the public report because I believed it was the price of keeping 2 plants open while we financed the correction. What I did not know was that Blake later used that sealed dispute to damage your reputation with other employers. Ryan's expression hardened. And when you suspected it? By then Claire was gone, the records were scattered, Blake denied it, and you wanted nothing more from this company. I had suspicion, not proof. So you let him keep moving up. Arthur did not defend himself. Yes. I should have fought harder. Yes, Ryan said. Arthur nodded. There was a soft knock. Natalie opened the door. Emily is asking for her father. Ryan stepped away from the desk immediately. Whatever waited in the Westbridge file could wait another minute. His daughter could not. When Ryan returned to the library, Emily stood beneath a wall of framed photographs. Natalie was several feet away. Emily pointed toward one picture. Dad, is that your watch? Ryan stopped. The photograph had been taken outside Prescott Dynamics' original assembly plant 12 years earlier. Arthur stood in the center beside 6 engineers. At the far edge, only part of another man remained visible. A shoulder. Half an arm. A wrist wearing an old silver watch with a narrow scratch across its face. Ryan wore the same watch now. Emily looked from the photograph to his wrist. That's you, right? Natalie stepped closer. The image had clearly been cropped. Ryan gently lowered Emily's hand. It was a long time ago. Why did they cut you out? The question landed harder than accusation because there was no anger in it. Only confusion. Ryan looked at the photograph. Sometimes people are more comfortable with a story when certain names are missing. Natalie heard every word. Then why didn't you put your name back? Ryan turned toward her. She expected resentment. Instead, she found something tired. Because respect means very little if you have to force someone to give it to you. Emily slipped her hand into his. But it was still wrong. Ryan gave her a faint smile. Yes, sweetheart. It was. Across the room, Blake had returned. He stood perfectly still. For the first time, Natalie saw something in his expression that had not been there before. Fear. Later that night, Natalie searched the company archives. Ryan had no public commendation or engineering profile, but the old project code produced a scanned memorandum, original field assessment prepared by Ryan Whitaker. His name had been crossed out and Blake Thornton's typed above it. Arthur had written in the margin, keep original sealed. Do not destroy. The access history showed Blake had reopened that sealed file 6 years later. A second archive listed 6 outside reference requests after Ryan left, for had been routed through Blake's office. The responses were missing. It was not proof. But the past finally had a shape. By 7 the next morning, Arthur was already in the breakfast room when Natalie entered carrying the documents. Why is Ryan's name crossed out? Arthur looked at the memorandum. Because I allowed fear to make a decision that honor should have made. Blake accessed the sealed file 6 years later. Arthur's face changed. Before he could answer, another voice came from the doorway. That is not the part that should scare you. Margaret Ellis stepped inside. 64 now, gray hair pinned neatly behind her ears, she had led engineering at Prescott Dynamics before retiring 5 years earlier. Arthur had called her before dawn. Margaret placed a leather portfolio on the table. 12 years ago, Ryan found a control system defect that could pass inspection and still fail under sustained heat. He documented it, reproduced it, and refused to sign the release. Blake managed the project. Publicly exposing the full failure before financing was secured could have closed 2 plants and cost almost 1,800 jobs. Ryan agreed to keep the internal dispute out of the public version only if the defect was corrected and no worker was sacrificed. Arthur said quietly, "I gave him my word." The plant stayed open. The workers kept their jobs. But afterward, Blake quietly described Ryan to outside employers as reckless and difficult to manage. Natalie's jaw tightened. "Can you prove that?" Margaret opened the portfolio. One piece. She removed an old fax copy. It was from a recruiting firm. A handwritten note summarized a reference call. Thornton advises caution. Questions judgment under pressure. Natalie read the sentence twice. Why was this never investigated? Ryan found out after Claire became sick, Margaret said. By then he didn't have the energy for another war. Arthur looked toward the window. I offered to help. He refused. Arthur nodded. Not out of pride. He told me he had already spent too much of Claire's time defending himself to people who had decided what they wanted to believe. Margaret continued. Claire died 3 years later. Ryan raised Emily alone, opened a small electrical repair shop, and never used this story to ask anyone for sympathy. Natalie remembered the old pickup. The worn jacket. The way she had looked at him for 5 seconds and decided where he belonged. Margaret placed another document on the table. This came in 6 weeks ago. Westbridge Energy. At the bottom was Blake Thornton's digital approval. Margaret's voice lowered. The same kind of thermal variance. The same habit of reducing dangerous data into harmless averages. Natalie looked at the clock. The board vote was in 3 hours. Her phone rang. Blake. She answered. Where are you? On my way to headquarters. We need the Westbridge vote closed before the market opens fully. Natalie looked at the report. Someone already has questions. A pause. Who? Ryan Whitaker. Blake exhaled slowly. Natalie, your father is sentimental. Ryan is bitter. Neither of them should be shaping a $680 million transaction. Did you approve the reclassification? I approved the correction. That was not my question. Silence. Then Blake's voice hardened. You are the chief executive officer. Act like one. Natalie ended the call. 30 minutes later, she found Ryan in the garage beside his pickup. Emily was inside eating breakfast with Arthur. Ryan was tightening a loose battery terminal. Natalie approached with the Westbridge file. I owe you an apology. Ryan straightened. For last night. For more than last night. He wiped his hands on a shop rag. You didn't know me. That didn't give me the right to decide what you were worth. Ryan said nothing. Natalie held out the folder. I need you to look at this. He did not take it. Your company has engineers. My company also had engineers 12 years ago. That stopped him. If I postpone this vote, the board may say I'm panicking. Then don't postpone it because of me. What would you do? Ryan looked at her for a long moment. I would stop asking what protects the company today and start asking what lets you respect yourself 10 years from now. Natalie lowered her eyes. That isn't easy. No. Ryan finally took the folder. That's why it matters. He opened the first page. His focus changed immediately. He turned 2 pages. Then 3. These readings were averaged across different load conditions. Natalie nodded. Margaret saw that. Ryan pointed lower. And this approval timestamp was entered 43 minutes before the final test window closed. Natalie froze. Meaning? Meaning someone approved the answer before the test was finished. He turned another page. Where is the raw sensor export? Blake's team says Westbridge only supplied the summarized package. Ryan looked up. Then you don't have enough information to approve the acquisition. Natalie's phone buzzed. A board member. Then another. Then a message from Investor Relations. Rumor, Prescott may delay Westbridge. Market calls increasing. Someone already knew. Natalie stared at the screen. Blake is moving. Ryan closed the folder. Then moved faster than the story. Not faster than the evidence. They returned to the study. Margaret had found a mirrored backup of maintenance telemetry included in an insurance data room that Blake's acquisition team had apparently overlooked. It was not a new physical test. It was raw historical data. That mattered. Ryan compared the raw telemetry with the board report. Test windows had been shortened, warning codes renamed, and temperature spikes excluded from averages. One test ended at 3:18 p.m., its summary had been approved at 2:35. That's enough, Natalie said. Enough to stop the vote, Ryan replied. Not enough to accuse Blake of fraud. Proving he knew is different. He told her to preserve the servers, lock the data room, hire outside forensic engineers to authenticate the existing files, and require independent field testing before the deal returned for a vote. Field testing will take days, Natalie said. If a $680 million deal can't survive a few days of truth, Ryan answered, you shouldn't own it. Natalie picked up her phone. Before she could dial, Margaret's laptop chimed. Her face changed. Natalie. A financial news site had published a story 8 minutes earlier. Former Prescott. Engineer behind last-minute Westbridge delay. Under the headline was Ryan's old personnel summary. Questions regarding judgment and reliability. Anonymous company sources described him as disgruntled. Natalie looked toward Ryan. Blake leaked it. Arthur's face hardened. I'll call legal. Ryan shook his head. No. He is attacking you again. Then let the evidence answer him. Natalie stepped closer. You cannot stand there while he rewrites your life twice. Ryan looked through the study doors. Emily was laughing at something in the breakfast room. My daughter knows who I am. His voice softened. I stopped needing strangers to decide that years ago. Then his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen. It was his repair shop. 2 commercial clients had seen the article, and one had paused a job until Ryan's history was clarified. Natalie looked furious. Ryan put the phone away. Now you understand why I don't want revenge making decisions for us. He's hurting your business. Then we prove what happened. Emily appeared in the doorway. Dad? Ryan immediately changed his expression. She had heard enough to know something was wrong. Are we in trouble? Ryan walked to her and crouched. No. Did you do something bad? The room went silent. He looked at his daughter. No, sweetheart. Then why are people saying you did? Ryan paused. Because sometimes the truth arrives slower than a rumor. Emily looked toward Natalie. Can you make them stop? Natalie opened her mouth. Ryan answered gently. She can help make sure the truth is checked. Emily nodded. Okay. Then she looked at her father. I believe you. Ryan swallowed once. That's enough for me. But everyone else in the room knew it could not be enough for the company. At Prescott Dynamics, Blake was already in the boardroom. By the time Natalie arrived, he had turned Ryan's past into the center of the meeting. His slide read, Westbridge Risk Review, Source Credibility. Ryan entered through the side door with Margaret. Blake smiled without warmth. Perfect timing. Natalie took her seat at the head of the table. Arthur remained standing behind her. Ryan sat at the far end wearing the same faded jacket from the night before. Blake began by reminding the board that Westbridge had survived months of financial, legal, and engineering review. Then he displayed Ryan's old personnel record. Mr. Whitaker left this industry under questions about judgment and reliability. Now a man with a documented grievance wants to destabilize a $680 million transaction. He turned toward Ryan. You run a 3-person repair shop and have been out of corporate engineering for more than a decade. You expect this board to trust you over national consultants? Ryan folded his hands. No. I expect them to trust the raw data. Natalie touched her tablet. The screen changed. At 9:14 this morning, she said, Prescott Dynamics retained an independent forensic engineering firm to review the existing Westbridge telemetry and document history. They have not performed new field testing. That will take several days. Blake leaned back. So there is no independent test. Correct. A few directors exchanged glances. Blake smiled. Then we are wasting time. Natalie did not blink. The forensic review has already authenticated the raw telemetry as originating from the Westbridge monitoring system. The smile faded. Margaret distributed copies. Ryan stood. I have 3 things. He placed the raw sensor export on the table. First, what the equipment recorded. Then the acquisition summary. Second, what the board received. Then a forensic authentication memo. Third, confirmation that these files came from the same system and were changed during reporting. Blake leaned forward. Change does not mean falsified. Ryan nodded. Correct. The board looked toward him. He continued. Some changes may be legitimate. That's why I asked for independent field testing instead of asking you to punish anyone today. Natalie looked at Blake. But the acquisition cannot be approved until we know why the most serious heat spikes disappeared. Blake's voice sharpened. Those spikes were engineering noise. Ryan turned a page. Then why were they reclassified manually? Silence. Blake looked at the display. Ryan pointed to the audit trail. Automated filters leave a system. Tag. These entries have user overrides. One director asked, whose user ID? Ryan looked toward Natalie. She answered. The overrides came from Westbridge Engineering. Prescott's final approval came through Blake's office. Blake stood. Which I have already explained. My team relied on Westbridge's certification. Margaret spoke. Then perhaps we should discuss the email. Blake stopped. Natalie looked at her. What email? Margaret turned her laptop. A message had been recovered from an archived acquisition mailbox less than 20 minutes earlier. The sender was Westbridge's internal compliance officer. Subject, thermal testing, do not finalize. The message warned that the summarized readings excluded abnormal sustained load events and recommended delaying certification. It had been sent 6 weeks earlier. To Blake Thornton. The room changed. Blake stared at the screen. I receive hundreds of emails. Natalie scrolled. There is a reply. Blake's face tightened. 3 words appeared beneath his name. Proceed as scheduled. He shook his head. Someone on my team could have answered. Natalie looked toward the general counsel. He spoke carefully. We checked the authentication record. The message required executive sign-in because of the acquisition data room. Blake's eyes moved around the table. The context matters. Arthur finally spoke. Then provide it. Blake drew a breath. Westbridge told us the inconsistencies were clerical. The quarter-end timing was critical. Delaying would have damaged the deal and possibly cost us the seller. Ryan asked quietly, did you tell Natalie? Blake looked at him. This is not your board. No. Ryan remained calm. But that was still my question. Blake did not answer. Natalie's expression hardened. You knew there was an unresolved safety concern and you did not disclose it to me. I made a judgment call. A judgment call that put a $680 million vote on my desk. Because I was trying to protect the company. Arthur's voice became quiet. That's what I told myself 12 years ago. Every person at the table heard the difference. Blake looked toward him. Arthur walked to the center of the room. There is something this board should have known a long time ago. Ryan looked down. Arthur continued. 12 years ago, Ryan Whitaker identified a design flaw that could have forced two plants to close before we had the financing to fix it. He agreed that the public account could remain limited on one condition: the defect would be corrected and the workers would not be sacrificed to protect executives. He looked directly at Ryan. I agreed. Then he looked at the board. I also allowed Ryan's name to be removed from the public engineering history. Blake crossed his arms. You made that decision, Arthur. Yes. Arthur did not flinch. I did. That answer mattered. He was not shifting blame. I believed I was choosing between one man's credit and 1,800 paychecks. It was a false choice, but I made it. He picked up the old facts. What I did not know was that after Ryan left, Blake used the ambiguity I created to damage his professional reputation. Blake's chair scraped softly. That is an accusation. Margaret placed the recruiting note on the table. Then explain your reference. Blake stared at it. 12 years ago. You expect me to remember one recruiter call? No, Ryan said. Everyone turned toward him. I don't need you to remember it. He looked at Arthur. And I don't need this board to repair 12 years in one afternoon. Natalie stared at him. Ryan, he raised one hand slightly. This meeting is about Westbridge. Blake gave a bitter laugh. Convenient. Ryan looked at him. No. Necessary. His voice remained quiet. If I use today's evidence to punish you for what happened to me 12 years ago, then I become exactly what you keep telling everyone I am, a man using a grievance to control a decision. The room went still. So separate them. Ryan pointed to the screen. Westbridge first. My history second. For the first time, several directors looked at Ryan differently. Not as Arthur's old friend. Not as the man from the article. As the most disciplined person in the room. Natalie closed the acquisition file. The Westbridge vote is suspended effective immediately. No acquisition approval will return to this board until independent. Field testing is complete and the reporting chain is reviewed. Blake leaned forward. Natalie, think carefully. I am. This delay could cost us the deal. Then it costs us the deal. Investors will ask why. Then we tell them the truth. The room went silent. Natalie turned toward the general counsel. Preserve every email, every version history, every acquisition communication. Blake is removed from the Westbridge process pending independent investigation. Blake looked around the table. No one defended him. He gathered his documents slowly. Before he reached the door, he stopped beside Ryan. You think you've won? Ryan looked up. No. Blake waited. Ryan glanced through the glass wall where Emily sat with Arthur's assistant, doing math homework with a yellow pencil. I think people deserve the chance to go home tonight without finding out we traded their safety for a deadline. Blake said nothing. He left. Only then did Natalie exhale. But the story was not over. 3 days later, independent engineers repeated the Westbridge thermal tests under sustained load. The warnings returned. 2 battery control assemblies exceeded safe limits. The defect had not been corrected, it had been hidden inside averages. Prescott Dynamics cancelled the acquisition. Investigators then found that closing Westbridge before quarter end would have triggered a multimillion-dollar bonus for Blake and strengthened his path to a board seat. Outside counsel also confirmed that he had authorized the release of Ryan's old personnel summary to the media. Blake resigned before the disciplinary hearing. Ryan did not celebrate. He was at his shop replacing a damaged commercial control board when Natalie arrived. Emily sat at the counter doing homework. Natalie carried a folder. Ryan looked up. More bad news? No. She placed it on the workbench. Corrections. Inside was a formal statement from Prescott Dynamics clearing Ryan's old personnel record. A second document restored his name to the original engineering report. A third confirmed that the company had contacted every major archive and industry database that still carried the old version. Ryan read them quietly. Thank you. Natalie shook her head. This isn't charity. I know. My father should have done it years ago. Ryan looked toward Arthur, who had entered behind her. Arthur nodded. Yes. There was no defense this time. Just accountability. Arthur placed another folder beside the first. Senior Vice President of Safety and Integrity. Ryan almost smiled. That sounds expensive. It is. Corner office. If you want it. Car. If you want it. People who call me sir. Arthur sighed. Probably more than you want. Emily looked up from her homework. Would you have to work here late? The adults became quiet. Ryan looked at his daughter. Sometimes. Every day. No. She studied his face. Ryan closed the folder. Arthur knew the answer before he heard it. I appreciate it, Ryan said. Natalie leaned against the workbench. That sounds like a no. It is. She frowned. You could change the company from inside. Ryan looked at Emily. I can help change it without giving my daughter another parent who's always somewhere else. No one argued. He proposed something different. An independent safety advisory role. Authority to stop any project pending review. Direct access to the board audit committee. A protected reporting fund for employees who raised safety concerns. And one personal condition. I take Emily to school every morning. Arthur smiled. Then we schedule around school. Ryan kept his repair shop. He kept his old Ford. He kept the scratched silver watch. What changed was not what he owned. It was what the company was finally willing to admit. A month later, Prescott Dynamics announced new engineering safeguards and anti-retaliation protections. Ryan's name returned to the historical record exactly where it had been removed. In the Prescott Library, an uncropped copy of the old factory photograph now hung beside the original. Emily found her younger father at the edge, wearing the same scratched silver watch. Now you're in it. Ryan smiled. I was always in it. Natalie understood. The photograph had not changed the truth. It had only corrected the record. That evening, Ryan and Emily returned to the Prescott estate for dinner. The sky was clear. The driveway was dry. Natalie was waiting outside before they reached the steps. Emily looked at her father, then toward the side of the house where the service entrance disappeared behind hedges. Natalie remembered too. She opened the front door herself. No service entrance today, she said with a small, humbled smile. Ryan looked at the doorway. Then at her. There never should have been one. Natalie lowered her eyes for a moment. She knew he was not speaking about architecture. Emily stepped inside first. Arthur waited beyond the foyer. Natalie held the door as Ryan passed, not because the board now knew his name, but because she had finally learned that respect was not a reward for discovering someone was important. It was the minimum owed before you knew anything about them. Ryan reached the dining room and pulled out Emily's chair. She sat down, placed her napkin in her lap, and smiled at him. "Dad?" "Yeah. Did you win?" Ryan looked toward Arthur. Toward Natalie. Toward the restored photograph visible through the open library doors. Then he looked back at his daughter. "No." Emily frowned. Ryan smiled. "We told the truth, people checked it, and nobody had to get hurt for somebody else to look successful." She considered that. "That sounds like winning." Ryan laughed softly. "Maybe a little." And this time, when the room grew quiet around Ryan Whittaker, it was not because someone powerful had finally recognized him. It was because everyone else had finally learned how to see him.